Hi, I'm George English, the Director of Research Through People. Now, people naturally come along to us and say, okay, can you research my ancestors in England, Scotland? But of course, they're very often much more precise than that. So what we're going to look at here is people who've got ancestors from Ayrshire in Scotland. Ayrshire, of course, is a county in Scotland that goes way back. So what we're going to do is look at aspects of Ayrshire, but aspects that apply at a local level in a number of places, etc. And we'll talk about those aspects and also use some examples to help to illustrate what can be found. So here's Ayrshire, and it's a coastal county, and you can see an interesting shape really. It sort of goes out into the lowlands of Scotland, but has this long coastline all the way down, quite near the big city of Glasgow, and it's got main towns like Ayr and Kilmarnock, and these have changed over the centuries, in fact, and they're much more rural areas. And with being the coast, there's particular things that go with the coast, like fishing and what have you, tourism these days, and so on and so forth. So certain aspects that would have affected your ancestors living in some part of Ayrshire. And the factors in tracing ancestry, basically, they're the same whether one's looking at a country or a county or whatever, but with some differences. So the people, your ancestors in Ayrshire will have been the same sort of thing, landowners, professions and so forth. Records will have been kept for that. The sort of records, being in Scotland, obviously there'll be the registration, which started in 1855. Censuses started from 1841, but sometimes you get lucky and find there were censuses before then. So for instance, in Galston in Ayrshire, they had a census in 1821 and a partial one in 1801. So sometimes you can get back a generation if you know where to look and so forth. Parish registers are the same, kept well or badly depending, but like the rest of Scotland. And then there's all the normal things, wills, gravestones, newspapers and so forth. But then there are local things. There are local things like the Statistical Counts of Scotland that describe various places in Ayrshire. There are things like local schools will have kept records and so on and so forth. So there may be local records which can help, and obviously one of the keys is being able to locate those. The archives in Ayrshire are very helpful and often help to unearth things that are relevant. And then you get the last two factors, name and continuity. Again, the same sort of factors apply as anywhere else. Continuity, obviously we're looking probably at people who've always stayed in Ayrshire, but of course there are those who've come into Ayrshire and those who go out from there. So if we look at Ayrshire's place in Scottish history, influenced by the same sort of thing. Now, the Highland clearances would not have affected Ayrshire, but it may well be, in fact it was, that some of the Highland people came to Ayrshire. The Industrial Revolution, big effect right throughout the United Kingdom, and of course that affected Ayrshire, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. The Irish Great Famine of Ireland in the middle of the 1800s, a number of you will know about this. A lot of people came from Ireland to live in Ayrshire, so a lot of people have got Irish ancestors. And then just the general British Empire. Ayrshire was affected like other people. People emigrated around the world, and we get people very often from Australia, America and so on saying, I've got ancestors who came here from Ayrshire. And so let's look at Ayrshire in a bit more detail. And in the old days it was made up of over 40 parishes, and you can see the sort of colour pattern there, and again this interesting shape sort of from north to south with the coast on the west coast there. Now, interesting enough, we're particularly looking at the last 300 years with most people. So in the 1700s was when the Industrial Revolution and various things started happening. Quite interesting looking at the parishes. So these are parishes listed, roughly speaking, a selection from north to south of Ayrshire. So in the north of Ayrshire, there's Beath and Stewarton. You can see the population in 1755, and then the population 50 years later in 1801. And there's a column there with the percentage increase or otherwise. So there's Beath has gone up by 50%. Stewarton has actually declined. And then we come to Irvine, which is a big town now. It's gone up slightly, not a lot, and then become more to the central belt. Kilmarnock very much started to be affected by industry in various ways. So you can see practically doubled its population. Galston and Saun inland from Kilmarnock, again you can see a big effect there. 200% in the case of Galston. Then we come down to Newton upon Ayr and St Quiverks and Ayr. Newton upon Ayr and St Quiverks were the two parishes just north of Ayr. So you take those three together, look at that. Newton 297%. St Quiverks 400% growth, from being very, very small to being of some substance. Ayr, the town of Ayrshire, obviously, a royal borough since 1205, very much the prominent thing, again doubled in population. And then we go further south to Girvan, which is a sizable place, you can see almost doubled, but then Ballantrae, the south, has actually gone down in population. People are starting to move from the rural areas to the towns where the jobs and so forth are growing. So, linked at the same time, 1707, the Scottish Union, United Kingdom with England and Wales, happened, and it came about partly because there'd been a disastrous colonisation project in the 1690s in the Darien scheme in Panama. Scotland was practically bankrupt, and so when it came along to active union and its proposed union, Scotland signed up very quickly, providing they got access to the English colonial markets in America and places. And there was an immediate economic boom. If you know Glasgow, I talk about the tobacco lords and so forth, and a lot of growth immediately because of that. But then there was a fantastic bonus of the Industrial Revolution that came along and grew in pace in the 1700s and into 1800. And the United Kingdom is the most successful economic union in history. In 1850, the United Kingdom had more than 40% of the total world's industrial capacity. And that was experienced. So if you take Kilmarnock, look at this population, 1,000 in 1700, 6,000 in 1800, 1900, another 6 times in growth, 35,000. Tremendous impact of this, and of course the jobs that went with it. So let's take Kilmarnock in a bit more detail. So here's a family, the Armours, old Kilmarnock family, and you can see them going back, and here we have Robert Armour, born in 1799, and the family's all there, and they married into the Loudons. Adam Armour there marries Margaret Loudon. Now, quite interesting to look at the occupation. So Robert Armour's a carter, he could do that anywhere. John Armour, a carpet weaver, BMK in Kilmarnock. Kilmarnock became very famous for carpets. And there's Adam Armour, an iron finisher, definitely working in a factory of some sort. John Loudon, a gardener, you can do that anywhere. So the types of occupation are being affected by the Industrial Revolution. Now there's the Armours. Now what's a unique thing locally in Kilmarnock? There is a map from 1819 where the people living in the various houses has been recorded. So a bit of luck here. Here we are, main part of Kilmarnock with the various names on there. Now the Armours, well, there we go. There's John Armour up here on the High Street, and another Mrs. Armour down here. So 2 Armours. So let's go from there to the census. This is 1819. There's John Armour. So 1841, oops, there we are, in that house, the High Street West Side, and by this time it's his son Robert Armour who's living there. So we can see that, and of course having a map with that on is tremendous. Now, interestingly, they married into the Loudons, and here's quite an interesting thing. Dean Castle is a very prominent castle going way back in Kilmarnock. Dean Park now is a popular spot for people to go to. Very interesting to look at the occupations of the family here, just as an example. There's Sarah, a dressmaker, you could do that any time. John's a brass finisher, Thomas a compositor, so almost certainly those are working in factories. And there's William becoming a tailor. You could do it anywhere, but again, the influence of the Industrial Revolution and the jobs that went with it is being felt here. Now, another thing, who are the sort of prominent people, who are well-known people from Ayrshire? In this case, Robbie Burns, very famous, Alexander Fleming and penicillin, etc. But it's interesting how you very often stumble across things like this. So here's John Richard's pub in Tarbolton. This was an ancestor of someone we worked with, and if you showed this to people from Ayrshire, they would immediately know that this was the site of what was called the Bachelors' Club, which Robbie Burns and his friends came to. And so this John Richard was the publican when Robbie Burns and the Bachelors' Club met in 1780. So this person, of course, was delighted to be so connected to one of Scotland's famous bards, so to speak. So other things that happened is time goes on to the 1800s, the railways start, and we saw the coast of Ayrshire there, and fascinating the changes that took place. So here's, just picking it at random, Ardrossan on the coast there, and here we have the sea. It's just the north of Ardrossan. There's a few houses here, nothing here, there's one up here, and so on and so forth. 1855, I've clicked. 1896, there's the railway has come to Ardrossan. There's a row of very nice houses along the coast here, and a whole bunch of other things, etc. It had a tremendous impact. It enabled people to live on the coast of Ayrshire and work in Glasgow, for instance. Golf started locally around those sort of times, and again, tremendous impact, and your ancestors may have been affected by that. And here's another thing that happened. So here we are, Gebbie, Loudon. So this is what's called the Irvine Valley, River Irvine, and textiles is quite prominent in Ayrshire, and the water was important to that. So here we have the Gebbies, and they are muslin weavers in 1871. 10 years later, in fact by this time John's son John is there, and they're now factory lace weavers, factory cotton factory. What's the change? The change was Alexander Morton, who again is very well known in Ayrshire, introduced lace making in 1876 to the Irvine Valley, and Irvine Valley until recently was very, very well known and famous for its lace making. So again, our ancestors are living in Ayrshire, affected by what happens. Another thing, a big thing in Ayrshire, was mining. Various places in Scotland have mined, and of course elsewhere, but you can see particularly in Ayrshire a lot of mining went on. So again, we quite often get people who have generations of ancestors who were miners, and what we tend to do in the reports is put in information about where they specifically lived, the rows and the pits and so forth. The other big influence that I mentioned earlier on, the Great Famine in Ireland, tremendous problem, starvation. Their basic diet was a potato, and potato blight, it failed, so 1 million people died, and 1 million people emigrated to Scotland, Liverpool, America, various places, etc. And exacerbated by various things, but consequently a lot of people nowadays in Ayrshire have an Irish ancestor of sort. So those are sort of things that happen, and quite interesting because of course some people have been in Ayrshire for generations. This couple came along and said, we're Ayrshire born and bred, and here we can see, and again if you know Ayrshire, here we are with the grandparents at Dreghorn Irvine. These are all in Ayrshire, Gelston, Market, Cambuslang is in fact up near Glasgow, Kilmarnock. So 6 Ayrshire, 1 very close, and Riddicks, and oh, America. Wow, where did that come from? And then in fact when we got back in time, we found people from Ireland, Wigtonshire in the borders of Scotland, Golspie up in the north of Scotland, South Ronaldsay is in the Orkneys, Sanker again so down south, and in fact the Riddicks couple. Funny enough, although they're America, what had happened is Ayrshire people had gone across to America. So we think we're Ayrshire born and bred or what have you, but it's amazing how often we find when we go back in time that that is not the case. And so I hope that gives you a flavour of the sort of things that can apply in Ayrshire. If you're from there, please get in touch, or indeed from anywhere. We specialise in all sorts of things, but particularly getting that local flavour about what your ancestors went through. So there's some contact details. If you get in touch, we give a free consultation, because what we want to do is have a look and come back to you with the options we suggest, so we can agree between us what we will do on your behalf. We've now got a whole lot of videos on YouTube which you can look at and gives you much more of a flavour of things. You can access this through our website, and the link is there. But please get in touch. Email us at info@researchthroughpeople.com. Feel free to give me a ring on my mobile, 07810 370 312. We look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.